All right. It is 10:01, so we could probably go ahead and get started.
Okay, perfect. So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody. Welcome to the third session of the Spectrum Institute for Teaching and Learning 2024 workout series. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Maria Espada from Universidad Rey Juan Carlos in Spain, and I'm going to be the moderator in this session. Today we have two presentations. For this, the speaker have 20 minutes for their presentation, and then we have 5 minutes to discuss. It's my pleasure to introduce the first presentation speakers, Kanae Haneishi from Western Colorado University, Matthew Curtner-Smith from University of Alabama, Aoba Matsunaga from Western Colorado University, and Marcus Johnson from Texas Southern University. And the title of the presentation is Promoting Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, JEDI, in Physical Education Lessons through the Spectrum of Teaching Style. So, Kanae, you can start when you are ready, please.
All right. Yes, we are ready. Here we go. All right. Does everyone see the screen okay? Our screen okay? All right. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kanae Haneishi, and thank you, Maria, for introduction. I am the associate professor at the Western Colorado University in the United States. So today we are going to present about the research that was supported by the Spectrum Research Grant from the Spectrum Institute of Teaching and Learning. So the topic of the research was promoting justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion in physical education lessons through the spectrum of teaching styles. So here is our research team members. So Dr. Matthew Curtner-Smith, professor at the University of Alabama, and myself, Kanae Haneishi, and Dr. Marcus Johnson, assistant professor at the Texas Southern University, and Miss Aoba Matsunaga, graduate student at the Western Colorado University. So the social justice movement and the advocacy for equity have increasingly given more attention in the literature around the world. Yet, but we continue witnessing discrimination against marginalized population based on race, gender, language, age, religion, socioeconomic status, ethnicity, nationality, ability, and sexual orientation, to name a few. In the United States, the hate crimes and the mass shooting continue to dominate the news headline. In the school settings, cyberbullying, mental health, and the increase in suicide attempts and death are the concern for many educators and parents. So although the concept of social justice in physical education has a history of 40 years in physical education, the scholars yet report that physical education curricula continue to be Eurocentric, elitist, individualist, masculine, and the competitive focus, reproducing a culture of gendered, racist, sexist, ableist practices operated by privileged white able-bodied Christian males. So now, more than ever, numerous researchers have demanded meaningful changes for social justice in physical education. So why physical education? So because physical education is social and dynamic and public, the social issues that we see in our society often reflect in our physical education classes. For example, girls are often considered and treated as marginalized. Less skilled or less experienced students are often excluded. Student with power or student with popularity makes most decisions in the class, such as playing positions, rules, and so on. And the Black and brown students are often considered or treated to be athletic and good at sports. And the Asian students are often considered and treated as a non-athletic and non-interested in sports. Students with disabilities are often excluded from that activity. That is why, given this rich teaching opportunity in physical education classes, physical education teachers can create the lesson where justice, equity, diversity, and inclusions are embedded in the students' learning experience. In other words, physical education teachers are in this unique position to play a role in the social justice movement as they address human dynamics and the complexity in our society during the lesson. So this social justice and equity in Jedi has been a topic for a while. So physical education teachers knows that many physical education teachers knows that the importance of implementing social justice or Jedi component in their lessons. But what seems missing is what teachers seems to be lacking is the knowledge about the pedagogical strategies that invite students' voice, that enable students to better understand these social issues they face in today's world into their physical education lessons. This is where spectrum teaching style fits into the picture. When a teacher deploys the range of teaching style offered within that spectrum framework, they empower students by offering them deliberate decision to make. They in turn allow the students to develop different human attributes across the across the developmental channels that you see in this the slide. The universal pathway, which is a universal pathway along which learner grows. The instructional environment fostered by the spectrum teaching style should or can allow the critical social issues reflected in the concept of Jedi to become central to the set of the learning objectives specific to each teaching style. So the when physical education classroom is deliberately diversified through various and the non-versus teaching styles of spectrum, different attributes are triggered and foster a learning environment where equity and the social justice are central components of learning objectives. It is evident that using diversified spectrum teaching styles can create a learning environment that promotes Jedi in physical education. So yeah, this was our idea, but we wanted to prove, or we wanted to see how the P and the other kinesiology faculties receives these ideas. And then is there any feedback for us to move with this idea forward? So there was a twofold to this study. The purpose of this study, one, was to determine whether the spectrum teaching styles serves as a useful instructional tools in which to integrate or embed a concept of Jedi to challenge student unconscious bias and the microaggressions that often reflected in today's society. Oops, okay, sorry. Okay, there was somehow the purpose of second study was gone, but the purpose of second study was to also determine the changes of pre-service teachers about implementing spectrum teaching styles and the JEDI concept from the beginning of the semester and then after the formal instruction of spectrum teaching style and the JEDI concept through the semester. So now I am going to hand over to Dr. Marcus Johnson to talk about the methods of the study one. Marcus, go ahead.
All right, good morning, everyone. For study one, the data collection process where participants read lesson scenarios and completed a questionnaire. And then after that, they participated in in small group sessions. We audio recorded the sessions, and we had discussions over how they felt, their opinions, and things of that nature. The intervention for study one, there was a presentation of the lessons, a video presentation, and the participants were also handed a written analysis of of exactly what was going on in the video. And then we were there to kind of verify, solidify, and the fidelity of the spectrum teaching styles that were being presented in the video. And then for the data analysis, we had a transcription of the questionnaire responses and from the small group discussion recordings. We use qualitative analysis using inductive and deductive methods. Identification of overarching themes and sub-themes. So we all went through and looked to see what emerging themes, what emerging patterns came up, and then we came together again as a group to kind of to narrow that down, to refine that as well, with the goal of triangulation of data for trustworthiness, just double checking each other, making sure that that we didn't miss anything, that all the information was there. Next slide, please. So the participants for study one, there were 20 peak faculty or in-service physical education educators who had some experience, expertise in JEDI. We purposely selected them because we knew that they would be able to provide valuable feedback, insight from just any experiences that they had, and that any suggestions or anything that they could make. We knew that it would be rich and it would be valuable as well. And all the participants were attending the National Association for Kinesiology in Higher Education, or NACAHE conference, because this group is a gathering of, as we like to see, as experts, and those who, if you were to come to the conference, you could see that JEDI, social justice, equity are one of the main focuses at the conference, and we just knew that we were going to get rich and good information with these participants. Next slide. And I believe study two is
Aoba, are you ready to go talk about
Yes.
study two?
Yep. Hello everyone. For study two, we collected the survey data from 18 pre-service teachers enrolled in an undergraduate PET program. In the survey, we used these 5 open-ended questions to ask about their individual thoughts specific to the written lesson scenario. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. Before the intervention, the pre-service teachers read a written lesson scenario that consisted of multiple spectrum episodes in which an underlying Jedi concept is promoted. And after reading the lesson scenario, participants answered 5 open-ended questions. As an intervention, the pre-service teachers received 10 hours of instruction of the spectrum teaching styles and concept of Jedi. The instructor for this course was experienced in the spectrum teaching styles as well as concept of Jedi. And at the end of the 10-hour intervention, the pre-service teachers once again completed the same tasks presented pre-intervention. As a data analysis, qualitative analysis was used. The survey data was transcribed, and 2 professors and 1 graduate student specializing in physical education conducted the analysis, determining 3 common themes and examining changes pre and post the intervention. Next slide, please. Okay, we are going to move to the result part. In study 1, we identified 3 common themes. Theme 1 is the effectiveness and adaptability of the spectrum teaching style. Many participants noted the effectiveness of the spectrum teaching style in incorporating Jedi into PE and indicated that it was appropriate for teaching the K-12 students. Next slide, please. As a theme 2, many participants noted that importance of applying this teaching method outside of physical education classes and in social life. Next slide, please. As a theme 3, many participants noted that the teachers' questioning and game rule innovations promote students' thinking and motivation to learn. Next slide, please. In study 2, we identified 3 common themes and compared the contents for each theme between pre and post intervention. Theme 1 is meeting the individual needs. In post intervention, there were more specific descriptions of how to incorporate inclusion, equity, and equality into PE classes. Next slide, please. Theme 2 is about the student choice and game rules. In post-intervention, there were more descriptions of new ideas for incorporating Jedi. Next slide, please. Theme 3 is application to real-world scenarios. In post-intervention, the descriptions of application outside of PE class increased. Next slide, please.
Okay, so then after the result, we discussed about what this result means to us. From the study 1, that what we found was that number 1, P and kinesiology faculties perceived that the spectrum teaching style is a useful and applicable tool for physical education teachers to apply critical pedagogy, particularly the concept around Jedi, by empowering students to critically analyze, reflect, challenge domination, and the belief and the practice that dominates them. And then P and kinesiology faculties also perceive that the using of spectrum teaching styles in physical education helps students to apply what they learn in the physical education classes into real-world settings. Especially that the spectrum helps students critically think, of injustice and inequity, such as discrimination, that exist in the society beyond the physical education settings, and potentially connect with more inclusive and equitable solutions. And then lastly, the P and kinesiology faculties perceived that the production styles in the spectrum teaching styles have particularly more have the uniqueness or have the more student involvement and they give more autonomy to students by providing choice and the opportunity for reflective learning. The autonomy and the student involvement value diversity, foster inclusion, and create just and equitable learning environment. From that result too, there are, even though the theme from the pre and post intervention was similar, what we found was the growth of their students' knowledge about implementing spectrum teaching style to promote Jedi concept in physical education. So, and then also the knowledge, growth of the knowledge, and then also the intentionality, increase in intentionality to teach using spectrum teaching style to implement Jedi was what we found. So the conclusion of the study was number one, P and kinesiology faculty perceived that the spectrum teaching styles are useful and applicable instruction tools for teaching concepts of Jedi to learners. I'm sorry, this is not a question here. And number two, okay, so for the study too, pre-service teachers became more knowledgeable and then also the intentional about spectrum teaching styles and applying that Jedi concept in physical education lessons after formal instruction on those two topics in the peak teaching method course. Then lastly, a little bit about the future direction. I would say the next phase of this research could go different ways, but the one way to go is to actually apply this idea to the actual school-age children, and then determine how their behavior or beliefs changes with the spectrum teaching styles and then Jedi-related concepts. Or, I would also say maybe we can go a little bit more with the pre-service teachers to see how their teaching perspective can changes too, overall teaching perspective, because I think that's the hardest hurdle actually to apply Jedi concept in education. So these are the future ideas to implement this idea into the next research. So thank you very much for listening, everyone.
Thank you very much for your presentation. So, any question or suggestions?
Min has included 2 questions in the chat. His first question is, can you share more information about the connections between the study 1 and study 2 in your presentation? His second question is, may I ask, how do pre-service teachers think that the spectrum will and is capable of promoting Jedi? What makes them believe in this core idea?
Yes, so the relationship between study 1 and 2 is that the study 2, we wanted to see, when you asking physical education teachers, in-service teachers to implement this Jedi concept, the first hurdles we usually see is their perception of what physical education should look like. Oftentimes, traditionally, traditional ideas, physical education teach exercise and then, fitness, and then all these things are important. And then a lot of times people want to spend more time on it. And then, oh no, Jedi things, social justice, they can teach it at the different subjects. So that the teachers' beliefs of it's important to teach this in physical education is the biggest hurdle. So we wanted to see how the pre-service teachers perception changes from this after formal instruction. But before we implement the intervention, we needed to see if this idea is actually a good idea. So that's why the study one exists. So study one is to see if the faculty members who actually specialize social justice education in physical education or the JEDI education in physical education and kinesiology, if they think that this is a good idea to using spectrum teaching styles to implement JEDI. So the number one is just to make sure that our idea is actually a good idea. And then study number two is to see if the pre-service teachers, perception changes to implement this idea. Does that make sense? For the number one question.
Okay, thank you. Another question? No? Okay.
Mark raised his hand.
Okay. Mark, please.
Kanae and group, thanks for the presentation. That was really, really nice. Did you ask in particular, the first group, the teachers who had expertise in JEDI, what was their knowledge base with the spectrum?
Most of them were actually the faculties that we interviewed. Then maybe like one or two was the physical education teachers in the study one. So
okay.
So the P faculties was very knowledgeable about that teaching styles because they teach in their universities.
So they actually had used the teaching styles previous.
Yes, they teach at least in their classes.
Okay, thank you.
But we actually, when we did the presentation, we did the preview of spectrum teaching styles just in case, people needed to refresh of that knowledge.
Good.
So thank you. We can start with the second presentation. The next presentation, sorry? Yes. The next presentation is about self-regulation lesson design using the spectrum of teaching styles. And the speaker is Professor Nikolaos Digelidis from University of Thessaly. Please, Nikos, you can start.
Thank you, Maria. Good day, everybody. I think I need to have presenter's rights because I don't see the button to share my screen. Okay, I now see it.
Okay.
Okay. So, suppose you now see
Yes.
my screen. Is it okay?
Yes.
Okay, I see nothing from you, but anyway, I suppose that everything is going fine. Well, this presentation is not exactly a research-based presentation. I could perhaps prepare some data in some future meetings, but I prepared this presentation in order to share, let's say, knowledge and experience for the past 25 years where we are using the spectrum of teaching styles, and we try to improve our students' teaching skills. Now, the main focus in this presentation, basically, I would say there are two parts. One part is related with examples of what we call self-regulated learning for student teachers, that they have to do their internships at school settings. And the second part, I will provide some examples of different levels of complexity within the same teaching style for the reproductive cluster. Now, talking about the self-regulation as a concept, it's a concept that refers to self-generated thoughts, feelings, behaviors that are oriented to attaining goals. And within this framework, learning is viewed as an activity that students do for themselves in a proactive way. So we expect, for example, that learners are aware of their strengths and limitations, are guided by personally set goals and task-related strategies, and they monitor their behavior in terms of their goals and whatever they set as goals, and they self-reflect on their increasing effectiveness. There are several models related with self-regulated learning. However, as you probably may know, Zimmerman is the one who has done most of the work in this area. And he has developed this model that actually has 3 phases, starting from the pre-episode mode, I would say, forethought phase. So before the lesson, before the implementation of the lesson. What we call performance phase actually is the implementation of the plan, and the self-reflection phase, where is, let's say, the discussion and the questions that follow the typical practice that we do at schools with our students. Just to give you a couple of examples, we have prepared, for example, a variety of forms that along or together with the lesson the lesson plan that they have to design, our students need to also think about this. And just to help you out and make the connection here with the previous model, we are not using all the elements of Zimmerman's model, of course, but I will focus on some of them that we have them in these forms. For example, talking about goal setting, one of the questions that the student teacher has to think about or write, apart from putting his goals and objectives in the lesson plan, just to put it freely in a different form, what are goals and objectives? And thinking about strategy, another question is what kind of parameters might affect the achievement of these goals and objectives? Which of these parameters is going to focus mostly? And talking about self-efficacy, this is very important element, I would say, within this model. Which teaching style match these goals? The performance phase, there are different questions focusing, for example, in motivation and autonomy. For example, how are you going to implement the teaching style you mentioned? And I need to explain here that these questions, for example, some of these, for example, the first one is being filled before the lesson, and some of them, they are filled after the lesson has been delivered, okay? Now, task monitoring is another element here, and a relevant question here is how do you check if your goal was achieved? And talking about task completion, is everything done as it was planned? After the lesson, after the implementation of the lesson, there are at least 2 elements here, self-evaluation and adaptiveness, with relevant questions that the student tries to respond. For example, did you face difficulties using this teaching style, or how did you act in relation with these difficulties? Can you provide explanations why something went wrong as not as well as it was planned? What kind of adjustments you needed, or what kind of improvements you think you can make next time? So in short, these are a couple of questions that we are using within this model in order to help our student teachers develop a pedagogical framework that would, and also skills that will allow them to use the teaching styles as efficiently as possible. Just to give you a picture of our program of study in relation with what we are discussing here. In the first year of study, apart from sport pedagogy and sport science courses, students go and observe PE classes at schools. So there is no teaching actually here, but there is some micro teaching, but within the university classes, not with students at schools. But from the second year of study, we start supervised micro teaching and internships at schools. At the beginning, at the first semester, for example, of the second year, we go to elementary schools. And then in the third year, we go to secondary schools, so senior high schools, not, junior high schools, not senior high schools, okay? And etc. Okay, just to give you an idea. Now, there is a need for teaching lesson design to students, and this need comes from the fact that students in the second year or in the first year of their studies, they don't have enough experience, of course, in lesson design, and they don't have teaching experience at all. So what they are basically doing, if we do nothing about it, they tend to reproduce their teachers' behaviors. And of course, unless we do something. And one of the key points that they have difficulties is how to provide choices. And I'll give you a couple of examples later about the guidelines that they have in order to teach with the use of the spectrum of teaching styles that is related with this. Now, this is less and less common, thank God, after many, many years. This is my terminology of this, the two balls phenomenon, very usual practice in the older days. Very bad organization, as you can see here, only 2 students are active and everybody else is waiting in a line. So one of the first teaching styles that we introduce our students is the so-called practice style of teaching. And we try to enhance the idea of taking advantage of the whole area, the available area in their school, the available equipment, and sometimes they don't have teachers, at least in Greece, they don't have, let's say, 1 ball per child. So there are many difficulties. So one of the things that we do is we introduce them to the practice style of teaching, and not only, of course. Now, the spectrum gives us many possible paths for teaching and learning, and perhaps many of these paths are different from what we have been used to as pupils at schools. So remember that our students coming to the university, they already have about 12 years of experience through their school experience that they had previously. However, of course, becoming a teacher requires some effort, or more effort, I would say, to absorb anything different from previous experience and develop skills that probably even your PE teacher, the teacher that you had at school, didn't have. Now let's see some examples using the spectrum and how we differentiate, let's say, levels of difficulty or levels of complexity within each teaching style. Let's see some examples with the practice style first. Now, of course, we provide the guidelines how to design a lesson plan with each teaching style. One of the key elements here is how to prepare a task card that will provide the guidelines for the students that will go and do the exercise autonomously somewhere by providing them at least some or all of the 9 decisions that we all are familiar with. Now, one element is task card objectives, guidelines for the student on how to use the card, exercises, description might be helpful to have pictures here, transitions exercise in case in some station they complete the exercise earlier than expected, and student choices. So also we provide examples for the practice style, for example, like that here with the same elements. This is a simple card with an objective, some guidelines, organizational part, and then the description of the exercises. This is the one choice that we provide deliberately to students, that we can provide to students, and transition exercise in case they complete this series of exercises just to continue being active. Now, what is important here, we have developed a variety of different levels of complexity or different levels of difficulty with its teaching style. Now, for example, for the practice style, we present these examples to our students. And for example, you have to see here this, the first 3 examples, they do not give additional choices to students. So we ask our students to prepare a lesson plan that will have one activity, for example, or exercise per station, but don't think about additional choices. The same here and the same here. You might think this is not the practice style, and you are correct. But we do this deliberately because one of the key points that our students hesitate is to offer choices to students, because this is something they haven't experienced as pupils at schools with their past experience. So we need to make a connection here and try to increase their self-efficacy, the sense that they can do it, they can actually do it. Okay, so they can choose any level from this. I mean, whenever every level that they feel comfortable, and proceed with the lesson plan. And of course, from every week, from week to week, of course, we try to through discussion to motivate them to go deeper into the styles, so at least they can achieve this level. So they will have a lesson plan with a practice style, with a variety of exercises, and at least one or more choices to students that they are deliberately given, and the use of transition activity. There might be some additional questions for self-reflection in the discussion that follows the class, but I don't think I will stay more here. I'll give you some examples from the reciprocal style. And again, just like the practice style, we have specific guidelines for the students, how to design a card, a task card for the reciprocal style. And these are the basic elements that the task card might have: the objectives, guidelines for the student who does the observation and provides feedback, guidelines for the student who will execute the exercise, and picture or drawing if we need something like that for better understanding. Again, after this, we provide examples for the ready-made examples that they can replicate. But after that, they are required, of course, to prepare a lesson plan with their own examples. And again, in this case, we provide different levels of complexity. For example, in the reciprocal style, perhaps the simpler example is have just one skill or activity and provide to the observer just one key point or one criterion in order to use to provide feedback to the doer. And then we can increase activities, the number of activities, and perhaps keep 1 point for observing, 1 point at a time, and then maybe one skill and then many points of observation. And of course, we conclude with a number of activities or exercises and giving many key points to observe and provide feedback at the same time for the observer. Again, there are additional questions for self-reflection apart from the form that they have to fill, and this is just examples. Now, about the lesson design with a self-check style, again, simple guidelines how to produce a task card with a self-check teaching style. And 3 main elements again here: task card objectives, guidelines for the student, and perhaps a picture or drawing if needed. And again, similarly, with the reciprocal style, we have at least those 4 different levels of complexity that we present to the students, and the students make the choice how complex they are gonna be their own lesson plans. Again, additional questions for self-reflection. As you can see, we use a lot of discussion before, let's say, the implementation of the lesson, but also during and after. And sometimes I think we are something like a pain in our students' head, but I think this is fruitful at the end. And now, just to conclude with some examples here with the inclusive style, some guidelines for lesson design with the inclusive style for our students include guidelines first to choose an exercise or a skill that they want to teach in relation with their objectives, analyze exercises or skills parameters, and then make a decision which parameters they are going to allow students to change when they will implement the lesson. Now, also, we have developed a variety of different levels of complexity, again here. So, for example, one exercise or one activity, and then provide only one parameter to modify. I'll give you an example in a minute. And one activity or one exercise, and then more parameters, one parameter per time, and then one exercise or activity, providing more parameters, and we allowed students to alter or modify more than one parameter at the same time and make combinations. Now, this is an example of just one parameter that the students can actually do. So we have 3 different levels of difficulty, and there is only one decision they need to make, the way they're gonna execute push-ups. If we would like to add a decision here, we could provide another question: how many push-ups will you make? And make a choice between 5, 10, or 15, or just leave it blank and let the student decide how many push-ups they will make, etc. So as you understand, you can make it even complex from here and on. Another example here, related with the push-ups that we saw earlier, that is a bit more complicated. When we provide, for example, a task card to the student, and we ask them to modify how open, for example, will you put your hands, how open will you keep your feet, how are you gonna have your knees angle? And if perhaps we would like to make some sort of combination with the self-check style, we try to introduce to our students these type of combinations between different teaching styles. For example, here, if we have this task card, there is a question here: which modification was the most difficult? And they write comments for every modification they have done, they have tried. Again, additional questions for reflection. For example, what kind of choices cannot be given to student, or what is the relation of the inclusive style or the combination with other styles that you know. And as an epilogue, I need to say just a few words or just a few examples here. Using the spectrum in order to teach physical education is demanding, but also because it's there is a lot of effort that the students need to make in order to make, let's say, appropriate modifications even within their own mind or their own mindset, because their previous experiences, they do not help them, I would say, very much. At the same time, we try to find ways to, as professors at the university, to try to find ways to use the spectrum as examples. And these are some of the examples that I'm personally using. For example, letting students make comments and give feedback for their fellow students. I mean, when they write an assignment, they can do that, or give students self-checklists for their own lesson plans and for their own teaching. Let them choose their level of lesson design complexity, inclusive style, or ask students to find solutions to problematic situations or give alternatives. Thank you for your attention. And just to conclude with this, in a real sense, I think we are all defined by our goals, by the goals that we set for ourselves. And the spectrum is a framework that a developing teacher can find an appropriate level of performance, not only among teaching styles, but also within the same teaching style. Thank you for your attention, and I'll be happy to respond to your questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Professor Nikolaos. I think it's really useful information, so thank you. Any question or suggestion for the audience?
I have a question. First of all, I really enjoyed the presentation, very thought-provoking. The question is this, when you're doing the self-regulation, what kinds of instructional models are the students using? And does that complicate them thinking about their teaching styles?
So, sorry, what kind of models?
Yeah,
Self-regulation.
so for example, are they using
Yeah.
TGFU or sport education or cooperative learning? And so if they are, and you're trying to get them to self-regulate about teaching styles, does using those models that have specific goals themselves complicate them learning the teaching styles, or perhaps it aids them?
Okay. The examples I provided were the examples that actually our student teachers have firstly with the spectrum of teaching styles. So during this period, I mean, we focus only on the spectrum of teaching styles. We do not incorporate in this phase, at least yet, let's say other models like you said, TGFU, like TPSR, etc. So this is more advanced. They are working with other models later. So the examples I was providing are related with the part that they actually focus only on the spectrum.
So by definition, they've got to be using some kind of model. So the gist of it is the content they're teaching it's a multi-activity format then. So what kind of content do you have them teach? So when they're working with the elementary kids and they're doing the self-regulation, or when they're working with the secondary kids, what exactly are they teaching?
Well, the PE curriculum, we have to follow the PE curriculum that our schools have. And just before, let's say, a couple of years, the PE curriculum was mostly focused on motor skills development. So it was an activity-based, I would say, mostly as a curricular model. And these are examples that are actually related with learning new motor skills. Now, the example that we need, let's say, if I have to make the same presentation after 10 years, let's say, or 5, I need to think different examples because the PE curriculum has changed recently, because I was the scientific coordinator actually about this. And this is focused on lifelong learning. physical activity. So the key for, let's say, the future years is how to promote lifelong learning physical activity through our schools. And I think this is very important. We have done very little work in order to find connections between, let's say, the spectrum of teaching styles and this type of goals, this type of curricular goals, like, for example, lifelong learning physical activity.
Yes, Nichols.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for your presentation. I got a quick question that can you tell us that what in your program that you think the spectrum will go first and then the other pedagogical models later? What make you think in this kind of pedagogical ideas? Thank you.
Well, this is, let's suppose, the way we have structured our program of study. So if, as you saw in the first, what was it? In the first slide that I was showing the developing student teacher, at the beginning, they start with sport pedagogy and other sport sciences courses. So they have just arrived from school and they carry all these different experiences, not different experiences, different from the way we are trying to teach them. So we think that is crucial to familiarize themselves firstly with the spectrum of teaching styles, because it's a pedagogical framework that you can easily find connections with other theories that they discuss, for example, in pedagogy. It's very easy to find connections with the self-determination theory, with self-efficacy, with a variety of concepts in pedagogy. And we leave this, whatever relates with the curriculum, later, because I think this is more complicated and more perhaps advanced. I mean, linking the curricular goals, try to link the curricular goals with the spectrum of teaching styles. We still need to do work in this area, as I said earlier, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have another question. Khalil, do you have a question?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
I want to ask about the feedback and assessment practices when we try to organize and encourage the self-regulation. How should we organize feedback and assessment practices within styles in lessons where we aim to encourage self-regulation?
I'm not sure I understand your question. You mean what types of feedback you provide, what kind of examples as feedback you provide to students in order to use the teaching styles?
Yes, what kind of feedbacks we use, or what kind of assessment practices we use when we are trying to encourage self-regulation?
Okay, that wasn't in any of the slides. When, for example, we provide examples for the reciprocal style, for example, or the or self-check style, we provide a variety of different examples of feedback. For example, the easiest way to provide feedback within the reciprocal teaching style is perhaps having a checklist, just yes or no. You have the criterion for the appropriate execution, perhaps, and then you have a checklist, just yes or no, for each of the criterion. And another level of complexity, of difficulty, might be, and also guidelines for the observer, to observe the doer for, let's say, 5 or 10 times, and then write down how many times out of 10, for example, he or she is compliant with the criterion. Okay, this is useful if you provide this type of feedback, if you are planning to proceed with helping them setting their own goals. Okay, for example. And another level of, another example of type of feedback, it could be leave an empty box, I mean, next to every criterion, and let the students freely write down their comments in relation with each one of the criteria. But these all are also related not only with how much the student teacher is familiarized with the teaching style, for example, but also how much the students at school are ready to respond to that. I hope I responded to your question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other question? No? Okay. If there aren't more questions, we will finish this session. So thank you very much to the speaker for their presentation and to the audience for attending. I hope you can attend for the next session. It is going to be on the 9th of April. So thank you again and have a good day and a good weekend.
Okay.
Yes, Nico.
You
Yes.
said 9th or 19th?
19th, sorry, 19th. Thank you,
Okay.
Nico. Yes, 19th of April. Sorry.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.